Welcome back, friends, to Emotional Edge, where every story reminds us that even in silence, the heart can still speak. Today, we meet Ethan Cole, a veteran who thought he could find peace in solitude, until his loyal dog led him to something that would change everything. In a land of snow and silence, he heard a child's faint breath and saw the truth through a dog's unyielding eyes. When the storm came, Ethan faced a choice: to protect his quiet world, or risk everything for a fragile life that wasn't his to save. But what he discovered in that frozen wilderness wasn't just survival, it was redemption. Stay with us as we journey through a tale of courage, sacrifice, and the light that never truly dies. The last light. Thank you for watching this story on Emotional Edge, where every tale reminds us that kindness, courage, and loyalty still matter. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Your support helps us keep sharing heartfelt stories that bring warmth, hope, and humanity back into our world. From all of us here, and from every loyal dog and quiet hero we honor, thank you for being part of our family. Thank you for being here with us. And now, let's continue our story. The drive through the Montana backcountry felt endless, a ribbon of dirt winding between ridges painted in gold and rust. Ethan Cole's old truck groaned as it climbed the last hill before Red Hollow, the ghost town he had bought for the price of a used car. To him, it wasn't land. It was a promise, a place where memories could fade into wind and dust. When the truck finally came to a stop beside a weather-beaten sign half swallowed by weeds, he killed the engine. The silence that followed was so complete, it pressed against his chest like a living thing. He stepped out, the crunch of gravel beneath his boots echoing in the emptiness. Shadow leapt from the passenger seat, her silver-grey coat catching the light like quicksilver. The German shepherd sniffed the air, tail rigid, her instincts alive. Ethan looked around. The town was no more than 4 buildings and a collapsed mine entrance. One cabin still standing, a warehouse missing half its roof, a leaning water tower, and a scatter of bones that once were houses. "Home," he muttered. His voice sounded foreign in the still air. He ran a hand over his short brown hair streaked with silver and adjusted the strap of his old leather jacket. After years of deployments, of explosions that burned through his hearing and his soul, all he wanted was quiet. Here, in this dead place, he thought he'd finally found it. He unloaded supplies, fuel cans, canned food, tools, an old generator, a rifle that never left his side. Shadow circled the cabin, sniffing corners, her amber eyes sharp with curiosity. Ethan watched her. In the service, they taught him to trust a dog's senses more than his own. "What do you think, girl?" he asked. The dog paused, ears pricked, gaze fixed toward the mine. Her fur lifted slightly along her spine. Ethan followed her stare to the black wound in the hillside, its mouth framed by rotten beams. A faint, cold draft drifted out, carrying a smell. Smoke, maybe, or something older, something human. He frowned, brushing it off. Probably an animal den. Still, unease flickered inside him. As the sun dipped lower, he set about exploring. The cabin's floor groaned under his boots, the air thick with dust and the scent of old timber. He found a few relics, an iron bed frame, a broken lantern, a newspaper dated 1938. "Ghosts," he whispered, half to himself. Outside, Shadow began pacing, tail stiff. Her low whine echoed off the cliffs. "Relax, girl," he said, crouching to rub behind her ears. But her body remained tense, her gaze never leaving the mine. The breeze shifted, carrying with it the faintest sound, a hollow clang, metal against stone, too steady to be the wind. Ethan froze. Every instinct from Fort Benning to Fallujah came alive. His hand went to the pistol at his hip. The clang came again, followed by a sound even more impossible, a cough, soft and human, swallowed quickly by the wind. Shadow growled low, muscles taut. Ethan's pulse quickened. "Who's there?" he called out, voice steady but sharp. Only silence answered. The mine yawned dark and endless, the shadow within shifting as if breathing. He told himself it was imagination. He told himself he'd come here for solitude, not for ghosts. But deep inside, he knew solitude never came cheap. It always demanded a price. And tonight, as the sun sank behind the mountain, he began to wonder if Red Hollow had sold him more than he'd bargained for. Morning arrived pale and brittle, the kind of cold that turned breath into mist and silence into something solid. Ethan woke to the faint rattle of wind pressing against the cabin walls and the rhythmic click of Shadow's claws pacing the wooden floor. The dog had barely slept, her ears twitching to every unseen sound. When Ethan stepped outside, the world was painted in silver light, frost glittering on the remains of Red Hollow. He stretched his back, the leather of his jacket creaking softly, and filled his lungs with the crisp mountain air. But peace did not come. His gaze drifted toward the mine entrance, black and still, like a wound that refused to close. Shadow stood already facing it, her breath a thin cloud. "You're not letting that go, huh?" he murmured. The dog gave a low whine, part warning, part plea. Ethan hesitated, then grabbed his flashlight and slung the rifle over his shoulder. The soldier in him, buried but never gone, rose quietly, guiding each careful step toward the dark. The closer he got, the heavier the air felt. The smell of burnt wood was stronger now, faint but unmistakable. When he reached the entrance, the light from his flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing collapsed beams, twisted rails, and the ghost of an old mining cart lying on its side. Dust motes danced in the beam like ash. He moved slowly, scanning the ground. That's when he saw it. A footprint, small, recent, pressed into the damp soil near the wall. Human. He knelt, fingers brushing its edge. It was too clean to be old. He froze at the soft sound of breathing. Not wind. Breathing. Then a shadow detached itself from the darkness. Ethan's hand went to his gun, but the figure that stepped forward wasn't a threat. It was a man, gaunt, with hollow cheeks and eyes full of fear. He was in his 30s, Hispanic, wearing a torn denim jacket and boots that had seen too many miles. He raised his empty hands slowly. "Please," he said in a rough accent, "we don't mean harm." Ethan's flashlight caught another movement behind him. A woman clutching two children close, their faces pale, clothes worn thin. For a moment, time stopped. The man spoke again. "My name is Miguel, my family. We only need shelter. We thought this place was empty." Ethan lowered the gun but didn't holster it. "It was," he replied, voice low, unreadable. "Until now." The woman stepped into the light. She was young, maybe early 30s, her dark hair pulled back in a braid, her eyes full of exhaustion, but not fear. "We will leave if you want," she said softly. "We just need one night. The girl, she's sick." Ethan's eyes fell on the small child in her arms. She couldn't have been older than 6, her little chest rising unevenly, each breath a shallow rasp. A wheeze slipped from her lips, sharp and thin. That sound pierced through him like shrapnel. For a second, Red Hollow vanished, replaced by the choking dust of Fallujah. 2004, a child pinned under rubble, gasping the same way before the medics came too late. Ethan blinked hard, the image fading, replaced by the trembling figure before him. He took a step back, forcing himself to breathe. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but his voice had lost its edge. Miguel nodded, desperation in his eyes. "We were told a man would guide us to safety," he explained quickly. "He took our money, then disappeared. We walked for days. The cold, it's killing her." The woman's arms tightened protectively around her daughter. Ethan's mind warred with itself, soldier versus man, rules versus mercy. Shadow broke the silence, padding forward with slow, measured steps. The dog sniffed the air, then sat beside the woman and child, tail wagging gently once. It was as if she had made the decision for him. Ethan exhaled, a long, weary sigh. "There's a cabin up the hill," he said quietly. You'll stay there for now. I've got food, water, a fire. But you'll follow my rules." Miguel's eyes widened in disbelief, then relief flooded his face. "Thank you, senor." Ethan turned without replying. The words, "Don't thank me yet," caught in his throat. As they followed him up the hill, the first light of dawn spilled across the valley, casting long shadows behind them. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't walking alone, and it terrified him. By late morning, the sun stood high and white over Red Hollow, sharpening every edge of rock and timber until the ghost town looked almost clean, almost new. Ethan fed the stove, boiled water, and set out a careful ration of beans and rice, while Shadow lay near the door, ears swiveling like small radar dishes, tracking a world Ethan could not see. Miguel helped without being asked, chopping kindling with economical strokes, while Lucia wrapped Isabella in a second flannel and coached the girl to breathe in slow, steady counts. Diego, solemn as a little soldier, stacked wood by size the way Ethan showed him, and for a fragile hour, the cabin held something resembling normal. Sunlight slanting across the floorboards, the quiet clink of spoons, a child's whisper of a laugh when Shadow nudged a fallen mitten back to her with the tip of her nose. Then Ethan's weather radio crackled, a clipped voice announcing a pressure plunge and a daytime blizzard watch rolling fast out of the high basins, the kind of storm that erased roads and reason, and the silence inside him bent toward a decision he didn't want to make. He stepped onto the porch, stared at the ruined warehouse, the leaning tower, the dark seam of the mine, and felt the past and present braid tight, Fallujah's yellow glare evaporating into Montana glare, two deserts of different kinds, and he knew the next right choice would not be comfortable. "Listen," he said, turning back to the family, his voice low but certain, "if someone comes asking questions, I need you underground, just for a little while. There's a pocket chamber near the entrance, drier than it looks. I'll bring blankets and water. We'll keep it all in daylight, quick in, quick out." Lucia's mouth tightened, the pride of a mother who hated to hide. But her eyes met Isabella's and softened. Miguel nodded once, jaw hard with recognition of a risk properly named. Together, they carried supplies down the slope under a high, clear sky. Rope, tarps, a small kettle, the last of Ethan's canned peaches set aside like a promise that sweetness still existed, while Shadow trotted a perimeter, pausing to stare down the track that passed for a road. Ethan showed Miguel how to lash a canvas windbreak across the mouth of the chamber, and how to thread a length of pipe through a natural fissure to carry smoke safely. He folded 2 wool blankets into tight rolls, the way rangers do when packs must hold more than they seem to, and tucked them beside a bucket of water. Daylight fell cleanly into the shaft, and for a moment even the mine looked gentle, an old scar in bright air. That illusion lasted exactly until Shadow's ruff lifted and a low rumble worked out of her chest. Ethan felt it in his ribs the same instant he heard the smooth, expensive hum of an engine that did not belong to ranch country. A black SUV glided into view, windows dark as mirrors, sun flashing across the federal seal printed small on a navy. Windbreaker as the driver's door opened. The man who stepped out had the clipped economy of someone used to walking into rooms that weren't his and claiming them. 30s, fit, hair cropped high and tight, eyes that skimmed and sorted everything. "Morning," he called, as if it were a neighbor's errand. "Agent Lewis, DHS, routine patrol. Got a tip about activity near old claims. Mind if I take a look around?" Ethan came off the slope slowly, palms visible, posture rooted, Shadow healing with a quiet confidence that said she would let the words work first and the teeth later. "You can say what you need to say from there," Ethan replied, voice calm but carrying. "This is private land. You want a search, you bring paper." Their gazes held, 2 versions of authority meeting at noon in a place that remembered boomtowns and funerals. Lewis's smile narrowed, his eyes flicking past Ethan with surgical precision. The tidied stack of firewood, the fresh boot tracks that he couldn't read well enough to age, the warehouse's broken mouth, the black seam of the mine that seemed to drink light. "Weather says trouble coming," he said, angling for friendly. "Folks do dumb things when storms roll in. If you've seen anyone, you'd be doing them a kindness by telling me now." Ethan felt the old training rise. Breath slow, shoulders loose, words measured. "If someone needed help, I'd give it," he said. "And if they wanted the law, they'd find it themselves. Until then, we're two men talking on a bright day, and you're 10 feet from my fence line." The moment stretched, glass thin. Shadow didn't growl, but the silence she held had edges. In the mine, Lucia gathered Diego and tucked Isabella's head under her chin, counting the girl's breaths like beads on a rosary, while Miguel's hands hovered near a length of timber that could become a brace or a weapon, depending on how the next minute turned. Lewis shifted his weight, as if testing the ground of the conversation and finding it held. "All right," he said finally. Impatience varnished as politeness. "I'll circle back with a warrant if I need to. Storm or no storm." He slid into the SUV, shut the door with a city click that sounded wrong under mountain sun, and was gone in a plume of dust that settled too slowly to feel harmless. Ethan stood in the full blaze of noon, feeling both relief and the foreknowledge that daylight could not outpace consequence. He walked to the mine, called softly down the sloping light, and saw 3 faces lift toward him. Fear in them, yes, but also something steadier, like trust learning to stand. "We're okay," he said, and heard the truth in it for now. Above them the sky was blister blue, but along the far ridge a thin white line had begun to gather, and the air tasted faintly of metal. Shadow looked up into that bright, unblinking day, and then back at Ethan as if to say, "Choose quickly, the mountain is already choosing." The storm didn't arrive with warning. It came like a curtain falling, erasing color and direction in a single breath. By afternoon, the light had turned metallic, the air heavy with the smell of snow before it fell. Ethan moved fast, stacking firewood, sealing cracks, tying the generator tarp, his movements calm but urgent. The radio's voice had gone from cautious to desperate, historic, life-threatening, travel impossible. And he knew enough about mountains to believe it. Miguel hauled crates with silent determination. Lucia packed food into tin boxes, wrapping everything in rags to keep it from freezing. Diego filled old bottles with melted snow. But Isabella's breathing had worsened. She sat bundled by the stove, her small hands trembling, each inhalation a soft, broken whistle. Shadow lay close, nose against the girl's palm, watching Ethan for orders that would not come. "She needs medicine," Lucia whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. Ethan stared at the wind pressing against the window, at the wall of white swallowing the ridgeline. "There's none here," he said, "but maybe—" He stopped, mind racing through the map of his tiny kingdom. The cabin, the mine, the collapsed warehouse. He remembered the old crates in the corner, stamped with the mining company's logo. Miners used to keep medical kits. He grabbed a lantern, braced himself, and pushed into the cold. The wind hit him like a hammer. It wasn't sound, it was force, raw and unrelenting. Snow blasted sideways, erasing the world beyond arm's reach. He leaned into it, every step carved from instinct, not sight. The warehouse loomed ahead like a broken ribcage. Inside, darkness and debris waited. He tore open boxes, fingers numb, breath burning. Nothing, just rusted nails, glass jars, a coil of wire. He kicked the next crate in frustration, and something inside rattled. A canvas bundle, oil-stained but sealed. He dragged it into the light and unwrapped it. A map, brittle and yellowed, dated 1930. The ink marked tunnels, veins, and a dotted line that led away from Red Hollow, winding toward the northern ridge, ending at a square labeled Ranger Outpost. For the first time that day, hope cracked through the fear. But when he looked outside, the trail had vanished beneath a living sea of snow. He folded the map carefully and ran back, lungs searing. Inside, Miguel was on his knees beside his daughter, whispering prayers in Spanish. Lucia's face was grey with exhaustion, her eyes hollow. She's getting colder, she said. I can't keep her warm. Ethan set the map down. There's a ranger station up there, old, maybe abandoned, but it's our only chance. Someone might have left supplies, radio, medicine, anything. Miguel's eyes flickered between belief and disbelief. In this storm? We won't survive staying here, Ethan said. Neither will she. The words hung heavy, but true. Shadow stood, tail low, but steady, as if she'd already chosen. Outside, the wind screamed across the valley, shaking the cabin to its bones. Ethan looked at the girl's tiny body, the rise and fall of her chest so faint he could barely see it. For years he'd carried the ghost of another child, one he couldn't save. He felt that same helplessness now, but under it, something fierce, a vow. Get ready, he said quietly. We leave when the light returns. That night, the storm buried Red Hollow. The walls groaned, snow seeping through every crack, the air freezing their breath into mist. Ethan sat by the dying fire, map spread on his knee, tracing the path over and over until his eyes blurred. The lines were thin, almost invisible, but they promised direction. Across the room, Lucia rocked Isabella in her arms, humming softly through chattering teeth. Shadow slept by the door, her ears twitching to the rhythm of the wind. Miguel paced, restless, watching the sky through the frost-covered window. You think we can make it? He asked. Ethan didn't look up. We have to. The veteran's voice was steady, but his heart beat like a drum inside his ribs. Somewhere deep inside, the old soldier stirred. The one who knew how to move through impossible terrain with lives depending on him. This wasn't a mission he chose, but it was one he wouldn't fail. As the storm howled outside, Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of a small, struggling breath and the warmth of a loyal dog pressed against his leg. Tomorrow, he would gamble everything. Not for silence, but for life. At dawn, the storm was still a living thing, a voice that screamed and whispered at once, but Ethan knew waiting longer would mean death. The cabin groaned under drifts, the air brittle, every surface rhymed with frost. He cinched his pack, checked the rifle, wrapped the child in layers of flannel, blankets, and Miguel's coat, until she was only a small cocoon of breath against his chest. We move, he said, voice calm in a way that came from war, not peace. Lucia's eyes filled with terror, but she nodded, pulling Diego close and covering his head with her scarf. Shadow stood by the door, tail down, gaze fixed on the blur outside. A soldier too, waiting for the order. Ethan kicked open the frozen latch and wind exploded inward, a wall of white that stole the heat from their lungs. They stepped into it, swallowed instantly, their world reduced to shapes and memory. The trail existed only in Ethan's mind, but Shadow moved as if the snow itself whispered directions. She trotted ahead, her grey coat quickly crusted with ice, stopping now and then to test the wind, to bark once, a signal to adjust course. Ethan followed, each step a battle, legs burning, lungs tearing. Miguel took the lead when Ethan's strength faltered, his raw determination burning through exhaustion. Behind them, Lucia stumbled, one hand on Diego's shoulder, her lips blue, whispering prayers between gusts. Every 100 yards felt like a mile, but still they climbed, driven by the fragile rhythm of Isabella's shallow breaths against Ethan's neck. Hours dissolved into the color of snow, sky, and skin. The same grey-white exhaustion that stripped everything human down to will. Ethan's vision tunneled, his mind falling into the mechanical calm of training. Count steps, shift weight, breathe, check bearings. He remembered other marches through dust and fire, and wondered how survival always smelled the same. Metal and fear. Hope became not a word, but a movement. The flash of Shadow's tail ahead, the stubborn warmth of the bundle in his arms, the sight of Miguel's shoulders heaving yet never breaking. Once, a gust so violent knocked Lucia to her knees. Diego screamed, his voice whipped away. Ethan turned, shouted, could not hear his own words, only saw Shadow circle back, pressing her body against Lucia's legs to help her stand. "She's leading us," Miguel gasped. Ethan nodded. He had stopped doubting the dog long ago. When they reached the ridge, the wind shifted, slower but sharper, carving lines of ice on their faces. Shadow stopped suddenly, nose high, body taut. She barked twice, once to the left, once forward, then sprinted through a stand of bent pines. Ethan followed, staggering through waist-high drifts until he saw it. A faint grey thread of smoke curling upward through the snowstorm. The ranger outpost. Relief hit like a physical blow. He stumbled forward, shouting, though the words were lost in the gale. Miguel caught up, eyes wide, disbelief turning to wild hope. Lucia cried soundlessly, clutching Diego. Shadow bounded to the door of the small cabin, scratching at it with frantic urgency. Ethan hammered his fist against the wood. "Help!" he roared. "Please, a child! She's dying!" There was no answer, only the roar of wind. He hit the door again, pain splitting through frozen knuckles. Then, movement inside. A bolt scraped. The door cracked open to a flood of amber light and heat. A man's voice, gravelly but steady. "Get them inside. Now." They stumbled through the threshold, collapsing in a heap of ice and breath. Heat hit them like salvation. The man who had opened the door, white-bearded, blue-eyed, wearing a red flannel and thick vest, moved like someone who had done this before. "Name's Owen Reed," he said, already kneeling beside Isabella, peeling back the blankets, his calloused hands impossibly gentle. "You found me just in time." He pressed an ear to the child's chest, listened, then looked up, eyes grave but calm. "Asthma, pneumonia. Bad, but not gone yet." Ethan stood shaking, steam rising from his jacket, unable to speak. Owen met his gaze with the clear recognition of one soldier to another. "You did right bringing her." Outside, the storm still raged, but inside that small cabin, the war shifted. From survival against the mountain to the quiet battle for one child's breath. Shadow lay at Isabella's feet, head on her paws, eyes fixed on her as if refusing to blink in case the girl's chest stopped moving. For the first time in years, Ethan realized he was praying. Not for himself, for life to stay, for silence to wait, for the wind, just this once, to lose. By morning, the storm had spent itself, leaving behind a silence so deep it rang in the ears. Snow draped the mountains like folded linen. The trees bowed heavy under white weight. The world hushed and clean as a church after prayer. Inside the ranger cabin, a small fire still burned. The air smelled of pine smoke and medicine. Owen moved with quiet precision, checking Isabella's pulse, measuring her breaths, adjusting the cloth across her forehead. Her fever had broken sometime before dawn. The rasp in her chest was softer now, a fragile whistle instead of a death rattle. Lucia hadn't slept. She sat beside her daughter, one hand resting on the child's chest as if to keep her tethered to the world. Miguel stood near the window, watching sunlight return in cautious gold strips across the snow. Diego slept curled beside Shadow, the dog's body a warm grey wall against the cold. Ethan watched it all from the corner, every detail sinking into him like a brand. The faces, the breathing, the sound of wood settling. For the first time since buying Red Hollow, the quiet didn't feel like something closing in. It felt alive, shared, earned. Owen poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed one to Ethan. "You military?" he asked. Ethan nodded. "Rangers, long time ago." Owen smiled faintly. "Special Forces medic, longer ago." The acknowledgement passed between them like a salute. No ceremony, just the gravity of men who'd both survived too much. "You did right bringing them here," Owen said. "Another hour, she wouldn't have made it." Ethan stared into the steam rising from his cup, unable to answer. Doing the right thing had never felt this heavy. Owen went on, voice low and even. "Storm's cleared. Radios are back. I've got a contact. Human rights lawyer in Bozeman. She helps families like this get papers, doctors, safety. They won't be ghosts anymore." Lucia looked up, tears bright in her tired eyes. "Gracias," she whispered, the word trembling with all the gratitude her voice couldn't carry. As the day warmed, the world began to move again. Owen tuned his ham radio, sending careful bursts of code. Miguel helped shovel snow from the roof, his movement strong now, his fear replaced by purpose. Diego found a notebook and began to draw. Crude sketches of the storm, of shadow, of a tall man carrying a small bundle through white air. Isabella, propped on pillows near the fire, slept peacefully. Ethan sat beside her, his calloused hand resting lightly on the blanket. He thought of the girl in Iraq, the one he couldn't save, and realized something that startled him. The guilt had gone quiet. It hadn't vanished. It had been answered. Outside, the sunlight turned the valley into mirrors and diamonds. For the first time in years, Ethan wanted to step out into that light, not to escape the world, but to join it. By evening, Owen received word through the radio. A rescue team was on its way with a doctor and safe. Transport for the Castillo family. The storm that had nearly killed them had also trapped Agent Lewis's SUV. The man survived, but would face his own reckoning. Fate, Ethan thought, sometimes delivered justice in silence. When the rescuers finally arrived 2 days later, Ethan helped load supplies and lift Isabella into the warm vehicle. She smiled at him, faint but radiant, her small fingers brushing his gloved hand. "Gracias," she whispered, and Shadow wagged her tail as if she understood every syllable. 6 months later, spring came to Red Hollow. The drifts melted into clear water that whispered through the gullies. Miguel and Lucia had returned, this time with legal papers and purpose. They were helping rebuild the town, planting a garden where the mine once gaped. Owen still visited from the outpost, delivering stories and seeds. Isabella ran through fields of wildflowers, her laughter scattering birds into the open sky, while Shadow chased her with patient joy. Diego helped Ethan repair the warehouse roof, and Lucia's cooking filled the cabin with warmth that reached the bones. Ethan, once the haunted soldier, found himself smiling easily, the weight of silence replaced by the music of life. Some evenings, he sat on the porch, the mountains glowing amber, watching the family that had turned his exile into belonging. Shadow lay at his feet, her fur catching the last light. The wind moved gently through the grass, not the cruel wind of storms, but the tender breath of a world forgiven. Ethan lifted his face to it, feeling not alone but whole. The silence he had bought had become something else entirely. Peace. Sometimes peace doesn't come from running away from the world, but from letting someone else in. Ethan thought he was buying silence to bury his past, but in saving one family, he found a home that healed it. Red Hollow was once a ghost town, but through compassion and courage, it became a place of life again. Maybe that's the secret. Sometimes the quiet we're searching for is waiting inside the hearts we choose to protect.